At my housewarming party, my daughter-in-law smiled, set a glass of whiskey in front of me, and said, "This one's for you, Dad, a new beginning." My granddaughter grabbed my sleeve before I could bring it to my lips. I put the glass down for only a second, and that was all it took. My son, right there behind my chair, reached over and drank from it without a thought. 30 minutes later, the scene unfolding before me stole every word I had. Welcome to Honor Revenge Stories. I'm glad you're here. Before we go any further, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Is this your first time joining me for a story? Or have you been here a while? Either way, I'm grateful you stayed. One quick note, some elements of this story have been shaped for the telling, and any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental. What matters is the truth at the heart of it. Any resemblance to real events or individuals is purely coincidental, but the message you're about to hear carries real weight. My name is Gene Callahan, and I'm 68 years old. That number used to gnaw at me, felt like a timer, counting down to irrelevance, to being pushed aside by a world that prizes youth above everything else. But standing in the living room of my new house on this bright June morning in Denver, Colorado, I felt something that had been absent for the 2 years since my wife Vera passed possibility. The Craftsman-style house wasn't just a purchase. It was a declaration. After 3 decades of designing buildings for other people, poring over blueprints until my vision went soft, managing construction sites through rain that punched through every layer you put on, I'd finally done something for myself. Well, not built exactly. I'd bought it from a couple heading to Florida for retirement, but every detail that mattered had been my choice. The walnut floors that caught the morning light just right. The built-in bookshelves in the living room deep enough to hold my architecture books and Vera's novels. The kitchen with east-facing windows so I could drink my coffee and watch sunrise break over the neighbors' maple trees. I moved through each room slowly that morning, running my hand along the door frames, inspecting the corners where walls met ceilings, old reflexes from a lifetime of catching contractor shortcuts. Everything was solid. Everything was mine. Starting over at 68 felt right in a way I hadn't anticipated. The house had 3 bedrooms, one for me, one fitted out as an office, though what I'd actually do with it now that I was retired remained unclear, and one for Lena, my granddaughter, for the weekends she stayed over. She was 8 years old, pure energy and endless questions with Vera's eyes and her mother's iron will. I'd already put a small desk in there for her drawings, and the stuffed animals she'd left on her last visit arranged on the bed like a panel of tiny critics evaluating my decorating choices. My son Nate and his wife Petra lived 20 minutes away, close enough for Sunday dinners, far enough that I wasn't crowding them, which was something Vera had always cautioned me about. "Let them live their lives, Gene," she'd say. "You raised a good man. Trust that." I did trust Nate. He taught English at Lakewood High School, patient and deliberate, the kind of son who called just to check in, who remembered the anniversary of his mother's death without ever needing a prompt. At 38, he'd made a good life for himself. He and Petra had married 9 years ago in a ceremony beside Cherry Creek Reservoir. They'd welcomed me into their world with a warmth that never seemed forced, at least not in the beginning. But Petra, there was something about my daughter-in-law I couldn't pin down, couldn't shake loose. She was charming, no question about it. A real estate agent who knew exactly when to smile, who had a gift for making you feel like the only person in the room. When I told them I was buying this house, she lit up asking all the right questions about square footage and property values and neighborhood amenities. She'd always been drawn to the finer things, luxury cars, designer handbags, the kind of lifestyle her commissions should have covered. But over the years, I'd watched Nate quietly absorbing more of the household costs, while Petra chased bigger deals that never quite closed. Not my place, I'd told myself. Every marriage works out its own arrangement. Then, about 3 months ago, she'd raised the idea over dinner. I should think about putting the house into a family trust. Just for estate planning, Dad, she'd said she'd called me that for 9 years since the wedding. But lately it rang less like affection and more like a staking of ground. It would make things so much simpler for Nate when the time comes. You know how messy probate gets. I'd smiled and steered the conversation elsewhere. I was 68, not 88. And the way she'd said "when the time comes" had felt less like concern and more like anticipation. I pushed the thought away at once. What kind of man suspects his daughter-in-law of having an agenda? Vera would have said I was being paranoid. But Vera wasn't here anymore. And my architect's instinct, the one that could spot a load-bearing wall hiding behind decorative trim, that could sense structural rot beneath a fresh coat of paint, that instinct was quietly insisting that Petra's helpfulness had a foundation I couldn't quite see. I set the thought aside and stepped out onto the back porch. Tonight was my housewarming party. My chance to show this place to the people who mattered. Nate and Lena, certainly. My old colleague Hal Brennan, who'd helped me get through retirement without losing my bearings. A few neighbors I'd met during the move, and even Petra. Though I noticed an odd reluctance in myself to have her here, moving through my rooms, measuring everything with that appraising eye she brought to every property. The backyard was modest, but right. A brick patio, where I'd set up a smoker for tonight. The cottonwood tree that had sold me on the property, its branches spreading like a benediction over the lawn, garden beds running along the fence that I'd planned to fill with vegetables come spring, assuming my knees would cooperate. Inside, I'd laid out glasses and plates, arranged the furniture to pull people into conversation, and picked up the good whiskey that Nate favored. Everything was ready. Everything looked perfect. So why was there this low-grade hum of unease underneath my excitement? Why did my thoughts keep drifting back to Petra's expression when she talked about the family trust? Why did I keep reviewing in my head the locks on my doors, the passwords on my accounts, the language in my will? "You're being ridiculous," I said out loud to the empty house. My voice landed strangely in the unfamiliar space, like it belonged to someone older than I felt inside. "It's just a party." I checked my watch. 6 hours until guests arrived. 6 hours to let go of this unease and remind myself that I had something worth celebrating. I'd worked 3 jobs after Vera died young to put Nate through college. I'd held back every dollar I could manage for 30 years. This house wasn't just timber and nails. It was proof that sacrifice has a return, that patience earns its reward, that a man can still build something worth having, even after he's lost everything that made building feel worthwhile. Tonight was about joy, about new beginnings, about letting my son and granddaughter see that I was thriving, not just getting by. I stood at the living room window, watching the quiet street below maple trees dragging their morning shadows across clean lawns, neighbors out with dogs, kids tracing loose circles on bicycles, with that effortless ease you only see in neighborhoods where people actually know each other. This was my home, my sanctuary. What I had to show for decades of early mornings and late nights of blueprints and building codes of saying no to things I wanted, so Nate could say yes to things he needed. Nobody was taking this from me. The doorbell rang at exactly 6:15 that evening. Punctuality has always sat well with me, a habit baked in by decades of construction schedules, where a quarter-hour slip could send a whole project sideways. Through the front window, I could see Hal Brennan on the porch, a bottle of bourbon in one hand, and that loose grin he wore like a favorite old coat. "Gene," he said, when I pulled the door open, folding me into one of those back-slapping embraces that men our age had long since perfected. "This place looks even better than you described. You always did know how to pick the bones." Hal was 65, a contractor, who'd had a hand in half the buildings I'd ever designed in Denver. We'd spent 30 years going back and forth over load-bearing walls and the building codes. Somewhere in all that arguing, we'd become the kind of friends who don't need weekly contact to know the other one is solid. Come in," I said, taking the bourbon. "You're early." Wanted to see it before the crowd arrived. He stepped inside his contractor's eye, already moving across the crown, molding the hardwood floors, the way the evening light angled through the west-facing windows. "Walnut floors. Good call. They'll outlast both of us." That's the plan. More guests filtered in over the next few minutes. Bud Harrington, an architect I'd worked alongside on a hospital project in the 90s, arrived with his wife. Dot Weaver from 3 houses down brought a cobbler that smelled like comfort and good intentions. An elderly couple whose names escaped me almost immediately, but whose smiles were warm enough that it hardly mattered. The house filled with the sounds I'd been hoping for, conversation and laughter. Ice meeting glass, the quiet hum of strangers finding they shared mutual acquaintances, or the same exasperation with Denver weather. I'd set up speakers out on the brick patio, and jazz drifted in through the open doors, threading through the smell rising from the smoker I'd fired up earlier. I was topping off the ice bucket when the doorbell went again. Through the window, I spotted Nate's car in the driveway, and my chest did that thing it had done since the day he was born, that quick surge of warmth that came from knowing my son was close. Lena blew through the door first, a blur of pink dress and blonde hair. "Grandpa, your house is so big." I bent down. knees complaining, and pulled her into a hug that smelled like lavender shampoo and childhood. Not too big for you, sweetheart. There's a room in here with your name on it. And with the desk for my drawings, the very same. Nate came in behind her, and I straightened to embrace my son. He'd inherited Vera's height and my build, and at 38, he still carried that teacher's posture, shoulders curved slightly forward from years of leaning over students' desks. Dad, this place is perfect, really. Your mother would have loved it, I said quietly. Yeah, she would have. That familiar shadow moved through his eyes whenever Vera came up, but then he smiled. Come on, I want you to meet someone. Petra stepped through the doorway just then, and beside her was a woman I'd never seen before. Petra had on a dress that looked expensive, the kind that probably ran more than Nate cleared in a week, and her smile was camera-ready. Dad, you remember Nora, don't you? Petra said brightly. She helped plan our wedding. I bumped into her last week and told her she had to come tonight. The woman extended her hand. Nora Cavett. Wonderful to meet you, Mr. Callahan. Petra's told me so much about you. She was somewhere in her early 40s, I guessed, dark hair drawn back in a way that read as polished and purposeful. Her grip was firm, her gaze steady. Something about her felt deliberately calibrated, not unfriendly, but measured in the way of lawyers or accountants. Please call me Jean, I said. Any friend of Petra's is welcome here. But as the evening moved along and I worked the room, I kept finding my attention returning to Nora. Her questions had a way of sounding casual that they weren't. She'd admired the house, then asked about square footage. She'd praised the neighborhood, then steered toward property values. She'd dropped retirement planning into the conversation in a way that felt like a probe for information about my finances. Wedding planners didn't typically take that kind of interest in investment portfolios. I was turning this over in my mind, weighing paranoid against perceptive, when Petra's voice cut through. Dad, let me fix you a drink. Still your favorite old-fashioned, right? She'd already drifted to the makeshift bar I'd arranged on the kitchen counter, bottles of whiskey and bourbon, a bucket of ice, the mixing glasses I'd picked up just for tonight. She worked with the ease of someone who'd done this before, measuring and pouring with quiet confidence. But I watched her hands, watched the extra care she gave one particular glass, the way her eyes cut to me and then away, the way she set that specific glass on a small napkin slightly apart from the rest, separated in a way that could only have been intentional. Lena materialized at my elbow, tugging my arm. Grandpa, look what I drew at school. She pushed a sheet of construction paper at me, covered in crayon, something that might have been a house or possibly a spaceship. With Lena's art, you genuinely couldn't be sure. That's beautiful, sweetheart. Is that my new house? It's a castle to keep you safe. Something about the word safe raised the hairs on my arms, but I smiled and pressed a kiss to the top of her head. The safest castle in all of Denver. The party swirled on around us. Hal was deep into a story about a building inspector we'd both loathed. Bud Harrington was going back and forth with Dot Weaver about sustainable architecture. She had surprisingly strong feelings about solar panels. Somewhere underneath it all, Chet Baker played through the speakers, his trumpet weaving through conversations about property taxes and the fastest way to avoid traffic on Interstate 25. It should have been perfect. It was perfect except for Nora, who was talking to Nate, but watching me with an intensity that felt like she was sizing me up. Except for Petra, who had finished mixing and was now crossing toward me with one glass held carefully in both hands, her smile bright enough to sting. Petra moved closer. The crystal catching the lamplight, amber liquid shifting as she walked. That smile was flawless, the practiced kind, the sort real estate agents train themselves to deploy like a tool. Professional warmth, no actual heat behind it. But her eyes were tracking me, the way I'd watched contractors study a building, slated for demolition, measuring, calculating, waiting to see which wall gave way first. For my favorite dad, she said, extending the glass. Just the way you like it? She offered it with both hands like a presentation. Enjoy. I took it, felt the cool weight of the crystal settle in my palm. The amber liquid caught the light from the chandelier Vera and I had chosen together 30 years ago. Thanks, Petra. You didn't need to go to all this trouble. No trouble at all. Her smile held, too perfectly. Something deep in my gut twisted the same instinct that had kept a dozen projects from going sideways over 30 years. The one that flagged when a beam was a quarter-inch out, when a foundation plan had a number that didn't sit right, when a contractor's bid was too clean to be honest. I set the glass on the side table. I'll get to it in a minute. Let me make the rounds first. For just a fraction of a second, something crossed her face. Disappointment, frustration. Then the smile locked back into place. Of course, Dad. Whenever you're ready. The doorbell rang again. I turned toward the foyer, grateful for the reason to move. That must be Walt. He texted that he'd be running behind. I didn't see Nate step up behind me. Didn't see him reach toward the side table. Didn't register which glass he picked up. By the time I'd opened the door and welcomed Walt inside, an old colleague from my early days at the firm, Nate was already back across the room, laughing with Hal Brennan by the window, whiskey in hand, something about the school year wrapping up. The party found its footing. Conversation moved easily. Lena showed me her newest drawing, Grandpa's castle this time, with flowers carefully colored along the front walk. I pulled her close and held on, feeling the small press of her arms around my neck. For a moment, everything felt exactly right. But 15 minutes in, I noticed Nate dragging a hand across his forehead. "You okay, son?" I asked, moving toward him. "Yeah, just warm." He tugged at his collar, face flushed. "Must be all the people in here." I frowned. It was 74 degrees inside, perfectly comfortable. "Want some water?" "No, I'm fine." He waved me off and turned back to Hal. But I caught the way he steadied himself against the wall, just for a moment, just long enough to notice. 10 minutes after that, Nate tracked down Petra in the kitchen. I caught the exchange through the open doorway. "I've got a headache," he said. "And I'm dizzy." "Did I drink that old-fashioned too fast?" Petra's voice came back smooth, all concern. "Maybe you're coming down with something, honey. You've been pushing hard with finals." "Yeah, maybe." He pressed his fingertips to his temples. I set down my own drink still untouched and watched him through the doorway. His movements were slow, unsteady, not drunk. Something else entirely. 5 minutes after that, Nate's nose began to bleed, not a trickle of stream. He snatched a napkin and pressed it hard against his face, but it was soaked through in seconds. He grabbed another, then another. His eyes went wide. "Jean," Hal called out. "Something's wrong?" The room went quiet. Every face turned. I crossed to Nate in 3 strides. "Sit down. Head forward, not back." I grabbed a fistful of napkins from the table and pressed them firmly to the bridge of his nose. I'd taken a first aid course 30 years ago after a site accident. The basics were still there, but the blood kept pushing through the napkins, tracking down his chin, spreading across his shirt. "Dad, I can't." Nate's voice was thick, slurred. His knees buckled. I caught him and eased him to the floor as carefully as I could. "Someone call 911. Petra was suddenly there beside us, dropping to her knees, tears spilling down her face. "Nate? Nate, can you hear me? Oh my God, what's happening?" Lena's voice, sharp with fear, cut through everything. "Daddy, Grandpa, what's wrong with Daddy?" "He's going to be okay, sweetheart." I said, though I wasn't certain I believed it. The bleeding wasn't slowing. Nate's eyes were losing focus, drifting back. "Stay with me, son." I kept the pressure on, but now blood was seeping from the corners of his mouth, welling from his gums. Hal was on with 911 voice level, reading out our address. Bud Harrington had stepped in to move the other guests back, clearing the floor. Dot Weaver had guided Lena out of the room. The dispatcher's voice came through Hal's phone on speaker. "Is the patient conscious?" "No, barely," I said loudly enough for her to pick up. "He's bleeding from his nose and mouth and we can't get it stopped." "What has he consumed in the last hour?" "Whiskey," I said. "Just whiskey. We're having a party." "Any medications? Any known allergies?" "No, nothing." Nate's eyes fluttered. The hand gripping mine went slack. "Nate!" Petra's scream was raw, desperate, convincing. I looked up at her, and for just a moment, our eyes met. Hers were wide, wet with tears. But something behind them didn't line up. Something was off. The ambulance arrived 8 minutes later. Denver fire and rescue sirens, wailing lights strobing through the front windows. The paramedics moved fast and professional, taking over from me with practiced efficiency. "A possible anticoagulant overdose," one of them muttered to his partner while checking Nate's vitals. "Pupils reactive BP dropping. Let's move." They got Nate onto the gurney. I climbed into the ambulance beside him. "I'm coming too," Petra said. But the paramedic shook his head. "Only one family member. Meet us at St. Joseph Hospital, Denver." She stepped back, nodding, tears still running. "I'll get Lena and follow right behind you." I held Nate's hand as the doors slammed shut. The sirens screamed to life. Through the small rear window, I caught one last look at my house, the house I'd spent 30 years dreaming about, and Petra standing in the doorway surrounded by stunned guests. Her face was a portrait of grief, but I'd spent 3 decades reading blueprints, reading people, reading the gap between what was said and what was meant. And riding through the streets of Denver with my son's life in the balance, one thought took over everything. That drink wasn't meant for Nate, it was meant for me. The fluorescent lights in the emergency room waiting area made my eyes throb, or maybe it was the fear. Dr. Sandra Vale came through the swinging doors, her expression serious. Maybe 40 with tired eyes and the kind of composure that came from years of delivering bad news. She scanned the room, spotted me by the window, and crossed over. "Mr. Callahan," I straightened. "How is he?" "Your son is stable. We have him on IV fluids vitamin K, and we're watching his blood work closely." She gestured toward the plastic chairs. "Can we sit?" We sat. I didn't want to, but my legs had started shaking. "Mr. Callahan, your son, was exposed to a toxic dose of anticoagulant medication, warfarin. Combined with alcohol, it triggered uncontrolled bleeding. We caught it in time, but it was very close." The words landed like a blow. "Warfarin. Yes." "Does Nate take any blood thinners?" "No, he doesn't. I'm the one on warfarin for my heart condition. I've been on it for 6 years. Dr. Vale's brow creased. "Is it possible he accidentally took your medication, mixed up a pill bottle?" "No." I shook my head. "Nate doesn't live with me. He has his own place across town. He has no access to my medicine cabinet." She made a note on her tablet. "Then we need to understand how this got into his system. Warfarin doesn't end up in someone's bloodstream by accident." Before I could say anything, the automatic doors slid open and Petra rushed in with Lena's hand in hers. Her eyes were red, her hair loose, her voice breathless. "Doctor, is he okay? Is Nate okay?" Dr. Vale stood. "He's stable. We're treating him for—" "Could it be something from the party?" Petra cut in, looking between us. "Food poisoning. A bad batch of shrimp." "Could someone have made a mistake with the food?" "This isn't food poisoning," Dr. Vale said gently but firmly. "This is pharmaceutical. Your husband ingested a significant quantity of warfarin." Petra blinked. "Warfarin? But how could that happen? Could someone have given him the wrong medication by mistake? Could it be some kind of contamination? Could— El mondin istik und bestil." "Petra," I said quietly. "Let the doctor finish." She stopped, mouth still half open, eyes moving between us. But something about the shape of her questions struck me as wrong. She wasn't asking, "Is he okay?" or "When can I see him?" She was asking, "What do they know?" Dr. Vale checked her watch. "We're moving Nate to the ICU for observation. His vitals are improving, but we need to monitor him through the next 24 hours. You'll be able to see him briefly once he's settled." "Thank you," I said. My voice sounded like it was coming from somewhere far off. Dr. Vale left. Lena curled up in a chair, clutching a stuffed bear someone had grabbed from the house. Petra sat across from me, phone in hand, scrolling and tapping without once looking up. The waiting room was nearly empty. A janitor worked a mop in the far corner. A vending machine hummed against the wall. The clock read 2:47 a.m. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop running the night back through my head. Petra handing me the glass. The way she watched me. The way her expression collapsed when I set it down. Nate behind me reaching for a glass. But which one? The blood, the panic, the ambulance, and now here. Warfarin in his system. My warfarin. The thought built slowly the way ice spreads across still water. That drink was meant for me. I looked up. Petra had moved out to the hallway, phone pressed to her ear. Through the glass partition I could see her pacing, gesturing sharply, her face tight, with something that looked more like fury than grief. She wasn't speaking loudly enough for me to make out words, but her body was saying everything. This wasn't a worried wife. This was someone whose plan had come apart. I stood, moved closer, kept myself just out of sight around the corner. Her voice came through the gap in the door. "I don't care what you think. It wasn't supposed to. No. Listen to me." She stopped mid-sentence, turned, saw me through the glass. Neither of us moved. Then she ended the call, slipped the phone away, and walked back into the waiting room with a bright, unsteady smile. "That was my sister," she said. "Just checking in. She's so worried." I nodded, said nothing. The sky outside began to pale. Dawn comes slowly in June, but it comes. Dr. Vale returned just after 5 as it was a.m. Nate's stable. The bleeding has stopped. You can see him now, just for a few minutes. I followed her through the maze of hallways to the ICU. Nate lay in a narrow bed, pale as the sheets tubes running from both arms monitors, keeping their soft rhythm. His chest rose and fell. Alive. I sat beside him and took his hand. It was cold. I don't know what happened last night, son, I whispered, but I'm going to find out. He didn't answer. The machines beeped. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. When I came back to the waiting room, Petra was asleep across the chairs on the far side of the hall, phone still in her hand, face at rest, the very picture of a devoted wife worn out by worry. But I had seen that phone call. I had seen what was in her eyes before the tears arrived. And for the first time in 9 years, I found myself wondering who my son had actually married. I got home around noon the following day, and the place looked like a crime scene that hadn't been touched yet. Plastic cups covered the coffee table. Half-eaten plates sat abandoned across the kitchen counter. A strand of decorative lights hung crooked over the mantel, as if someone had grabbed it on the way out. The house still carried the faint smell of whiskey and smoke from the smoker, but I didn't see it the way I had 24 hours before. Everything looked different now. I moved through the living room, slowly cataloging details the way I used to work through blueprints, measuring, noting, filing away. The side table where I'd set my drink. The spot where Nate had gone down. The doorway where Petra had stood, tears running, hands pressed to her mouth. I walked into the kitchen. The whiskey bottle sat right where she'd left it. I picked it up carefully and turned it in the light. Expensive label. Knob Creek still 2/3 full. I found a Ziploc bag in the drawer, slipped the bottle inside and sealed it. Then I grabbed a Sharpie from the junk drawer and wrote on the bag in block letters. June 8th, 2023, housewarming party, Whiskey Petra. Architect's habit, label everything, document everything. I set the bag on the counter and went to the bathroom. The medicine cabinet was exactly as I'd left it, organized alphabetically, every prescription bottle lined up in a row. I'd kept it that way since Vera died. It held things together. I took out the Warfarin bottle orange cap, white label my name in black ink. Jean Callahan. Warfarin 5 mg. Take 1 tablet daily. I unscrewed the cap and tipped the pills onto the counter. Then I counted. 1, 2, 3, 10, 15, 20, 21, 22, 22 pills. I counted again slower, lining them up in rows of 5. 22. The prescription had been refilled 2 weeks ago, May 26th. 1 pill every morning with breakfast, no exceptions. That meant 28 pills should have been in that bottle. I only had 22. 6 were gone. I opened the drawer beneath the sink and took out my medication log, a small notebook, where I recorded every dose. Vera had pushed me to start keeping it after I had accidentally double-dosed once years back. 1 check mark per day. Every single day. I turned to May 26th. Each day since had its mark. No missed doses, no doubles, no errors. Someone had taken those pills. I lowered myself onto the edge of the bathtub bottle, still in hand, and made myself think through it clearly who had been inside this house in the past 2 weeks. Nate and Petra had come for dinner once. Lena had used the guest bathroom, but I'd been with them the whole time. Hal Brennan had stopped by to drop off some plans, though. He'd never left the living room. And then a memory hit me like something physical. 3 days before the party, Petra had come by, said she wanted to get a head start on decorations, set things up early. I'd been out in the garage sorting tools. She'd been inside alone for maybe 20 minutes. She'd had access to this bathroom, this cabinet, this bottle. I got up, went to the kitchen, and opened my laptop. Searched Warfarin therapeutic dose versus toxic dose. Results loaded. I ran the numbers. Therapeutic dose 5 milligrams per day. 6 pills, 30 milligram total. Crushed into a drink and combined with alcohol, it would be more than enough to cause dangerous internal bleeding in someone who didn't take it regularly. Enough to cause serious harm. Or worse. I closed the laptop and looked at the whiskey bottle sitting in its Ziploc bag on the counter. I needed confirmation. I needed lab results. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for, Ruben Acosta. We'd worked together 20 years ago on a bridge project in Albuquerque. He'd moved into forensic engineering after that, analyzing structural failures, serving as an expert witness in court cases. He'd know somebody. The phone rang 3 times. Jean Callahan. It's been a while. Hey, Ruben, I need a favor. A pause. What kind of favor? Something tested, privately, quietly, no official channels. Another pause longer. Gene, what's going on? I can't get into it yet, but I need to know if there's warfarin in this whiskey bottle, and I need to know soon. Ruben exhaled slowly. Jesus, Gene, can you help me or not? Yeah, I know someone. Private lab on the east side of the city. They handle contract work for law firms, insurance companies. No questions asked. I'll send you the address. Thanks, Ruben. I owe you. Gene. He paused. Be careful. Okay? I ended the call. A minute later, my phone buzzed with the address. That afternoon, I drove to the lab. Ruben had pointed me toward an unremarkable building near the industrial district, wedged between a warehouse and a tire shop. No sign outside, just a number on the door. I walked in with a Ziploc bag. A woman in a white coat met me at the front desk. She didn't ask my name, didn't ask why I needed the test. Just took the bag, wrote down my phone number, and said 3 to 5 business days. I'll pay more for faster. She looked up. 2 days, it'll cost you. That's fine, she nodded. We'll be in touch. I drove home as the sun began dropping behind the hills. The house was empty. Nate was still in the ICU. Petra was at the hospital with him. Lena was staying with Petra's sister. I sat alone in the living room, the medication log open across my lap, running the numbers again and again. 6 pills. I'd spent 30 years calculating load-bearing capacities, stress tolerances, the precise point at which a structure would give way under too much pressure. This was no different. 6 pills crushed into a cocktail glass were enough to produce internal bleeding until it was too late to stop. And Petra had been alone in this house 3 days before the party, with access to this cabinet, this bottle. The lab results came back 3 days later. I was sitting in my car outside a Safeway engine, off grocery list, sitting forgotten on the dashboard. The email notification lit up my phone. No subject line. Sender Centennial Forensic Labs. I should have waited. Driven home, sat down, steadied myself. But I couldn't. I opened it right there in the parking lot. The first line dropped the floor out from under me. Analysis complete. Warfarin detected. I read it twice. 3 times. The concentration was listed in mg per serving. The number didn't register at first. 450 milligram in a single drink. I stared at that number until my vision blurred. Then I opened a browser on my phone with shaking hands and typed warfarin safe dose. The results came up at once. Normal therapeutic dose 2 to 10 milligallon daily. Not in a single sitting. Not dissolved into a glass of whiskey. 450 milligrams. I did the math, automatically, architect's brain always calculating, and the answer came back like a wall falling on me. That was no accident. That wasn't someone clumsily crushing a pill into the wrong glass. Combined with alcohol, that was lethal. And there had been more than enough alcohol that night. 450 milligrams of warfarin was enough to trigger internal bleeding so severe that by the time anyone understood what was happening, there would be nothing left to do. I sat there 10 minutes, maybe 20, I couldn't say. People rolled past my car with shopping carts. A woman loaded groceries into a minivan 2 spaces over. Somebody's kid dropped an ice cream cone and started wailing. Normal life going on all around me. And I couldn't move, because what was on my phone screen wasn't just confirmation, it was proof. Someone had tried to kill me. I drove to the hospital. Nate was sitting up when I came through the door, day 4 since the party. He had color back in his face. Fewer tubes, tired but alive. Hey, Dad, he smiled. They're saying I might be out of here in another day or 2. I pulled a chair up close to the bed and sat down, working to keep my expression even. That's great news, son. He shifted forward slightly, winced. Dad, what actually happened that night? The weight of the lab report pressed against my jacket pocket. Every instinct wanted me to pull out my phone, put the numbers in front of him, make him see it all. But I looked at him in that hospital bed, still pale, still drained, and I knew I couldn't. Not yet. What do you mean? I said. The doctors keep telling me it was some kind of medication reaction, but I don't take any medication, and nobody will give me a straight answer. So, I'm asking you. I picked my words with care. It was some kind of reaction. They're still looking into it. Into what? They don't know yet. He studied my face. Dad, are you okay? You look, I'm fine, I said, cutting across him. Just focus on getting your strength back. That's what matters right now. He didn't look persuaded, but before he could push any further, the door swung open. Petra came in, carrying a vase of fresh flowers. Honey, you're sitting up. She went straight to his side, set the flowers on the table, kissed his forehead. "You scared me so much. I thought I was going to lose you." I watched her. The way she ran her fingers through his hair, the way her voice caught just slightly on the word lost, the tears that rose in her eyes right on cue. It was seamless. "You've been incredible through all of this," Nate said, holding her hand. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Petra smiled, but her eyes moved to me for just a moment, watching measuring. I kept my face still. "I'll be right back," she said after a beat. "I have a call I need to take." She left the room with the phone already at her ear. Nate looked at me. "She really has been wonderful, Dad." I nodded. Didn't trust myself to say anything because I knew what I knew and I couldn't tell him. After the visit, I met Hal Brennan at a coffee shop a few blocks from the hospital, corner booth away from other customers. "How's Nate?" he asked. "Better physically." Hal tilted his head. I stared into my coffee. "Something about that night doesn't add up." "What do you mean?" I hesitated, chose my words. "I need to know more about Petra, her background, her finances, what she's actually been doing these past few years." Hal leaned back and looked at me steadily. "You think she's involved?" It wasn't a question. "I think I need answers before I start making accusations." He was quiet for a moment, then he nodded. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to hire someone, a private investigator." "Yeah." Hal let out a slow breath. "Gene, if you're right about this, you're going to blow your family wide open. I know. And if you're wrong," I lifted my eyes to meet his, "then that's something I'll have to live with." After Hal drove off, I stayed behind the wheel in that hospital parking lot, the engine off, going nowhere. The sun was dropping behind the West Hills, pulling long shadows out across the concrete. I took out my phone and punched in the number I'd tracked down earlier that day. 4 rings, no 3, and then a woman answered. "Rennick Investigations, Paula, speaking." "Miss Rennick, my name is Gene Callahan. I'm looking to retain you for something sensitive." A brief silence. "What sort of matter, Mr. Callahan?" I steadied my voice. "There's someone I need looked into. My daughter-in-law." The silence stretched longer this time. "Can you give me a reason I have grounds to believe she made an attempt on my life? Before I go to anyone in law enforcement, I need something solid. When are you available?" "First thing tomorrow, your call and location. There's a place on Colfax Avenue, the Copper Rail. 8 in the morning. That works." She paused. "Mr. Callahan, you understand, if what you're saying is true, this is going to get messy fast." "I do. And if I'm mistaken, that's mine to sort out." I hung up. The lot was almost deserted by then. Above me, the sky had gone that deep orange-pink, the color of a sunset Vera never got tired of watching. 30 years back, she used to stand at the kitchen window of our old apartment and go quiet while the city faded to dark. She'd have known exactly what move to make here. She always did, but she was gone. And telling Nathan that his wife may have tried to kill me, that wasn't something I could do yet. Not until the evidence was airtight, the kind he couldn't rationalize away. Not with him flat on his back in that hospital room, too grateful for her attentiveness to see straight. So I'd finally made the call I'd been putting off for days, the one that would either validate my worst suspicion or confirm I was unraveling. "I need you to look into someone," I'd said to Paula Rennick, my daughter-in-law. "Complete discretion is non-negotiable." Paula Rennick operated out of the 3rd floor of a forgettable office block in downtown Denver. She answered the door personally, mid-40s, with the kind of eyes that size up a person in the time it takes to blink. "Mr. Callahan, please come in." Nothing about the space was trying to impress anyone. Rows of filing cabinets, dual monitors on the desk, framed licenses and PI credentials, arranged on the wall, a photo of her alongside someone I couldn't place. She pointed me toward the chair on my side of the desk. I sat down. "Walk me through it," she said. So I did piece by piece. Nathan poisoned at my housewarming, warfarin in my medication, a drink that was supposed to reach me, 6 tablets unaccounted for from my prescription bottle. Petra had been inside my home 3 days prior, lab analysis confirming deliberate contamination. I spread the paperwork across the desk, the toxicology report, the timeline I'd assembled, and labeled the way I used to annotate blueprints. Paula worked through each page, her face giving away nothing. "Textbook financial motive," she said when she'd finished. "I'll want a full background workup." I handed over everything. Petra's complete legal name, Petra Langford Callahan. Her social security number, pulled from old joint tax filings Nathan had left at my house years back. Date of birth, home address. 3 days gets you the early picture, she said. A week for the full report. What do you charge up front? $2,000 to start. Hourly after that. I wrote the check without hesitating. 3 days on the dot, my phone rang. Mr. Callahan, I'd like you to come in. There are things here you should see for yourself. I headed downtown, same parking structure elevator, to the 3rd floor. On Paula's desk sat a file folder, not thin. She flipped it open and pushed the first pages my way. Credit reports. Your daughter-in-law is carrying $320,000 in debt. I read the figure twice. That doesn't add up. Nathan supports her. She brings in her own income, around $18,000 annually in real estate commissions. Before the marriage, she already owed $90,000. Since then, it ballooned to $320,000. Paula fanned the documents out across the desk. 15 credit cards, every single one at its limit. Bank loans, payday advances, retail credit lines I'd never encountered. My gut turned over. She went on, turning to the next section. Loan applications, everyone rejected. A handful included falsified income records. I sat there without a word. She rotated her laptop to face me. Internet search history last 6 months. A list filled the screen. Queries pulled from the home computer Nathan and Petra shared. How to contest a will. Requirements to establish elderly incapacity. Colorado, inheriting property from in-laws. Power of attorney. Aging parents. Warfare and overdose symptoms. That final search 3 weeks before my housewarming party. Something cold settled in my chest. And there's still more. 2 months ago, Paula told me Petra sat down with an attorney, an elder law specialist, Warren Tilden. Do we know what she discussed? Still digging? Attorney-client privilege is a wall, but I'll get around it. I didn't move. I just looked at what was laid out in front of me. The debt records, the search terms, a timeline so neat it couldn't be coincidence. $320,000. Queries about inheritance and incapacity. Warfare and overdose symptoms. A private meeting with an elder law attorney 2 months out from the party. She'd been planning to poison me. This goes beyond motive, I said, barely above a whisper. What you're describing is premeditation. Paula gave a single nod. Yes, that's exactly what it is. I drove home in a daze. $320,000. Nathan's wife was buried under debt he knew nothing about. And in the window leading up to my housewarming party, she'd been quietly researching how in-laws pass their estates down, how you get someone declared incapacitated, and worst of all, the clinical signs of a warfare and overdose. The portrait wasn't just clear, it was relentless. But I still couldn't walk into a police station. Not on this alone. Search queries have innocent explanations. Debt isn't criminal. Consulting a lawyer isn't evidence of attempted murder. I was going to need more than this. Proof she'd gotten into my medicine cabinet. Proof those pills ended up crushed into that glass. A direct line from what she did to what put Nathan in the hospital. Because the moment I leveled an accusation, the moment I sat down across from Nathan and put this on the table, she'd dismantle it piece by piece. She'd fall apart in tears. She'd flip the story and land herself as the wounded party. And Nathan, still recovering in that bed, still reading her fussing over him, as devotion would take her side over mine. So I drove, and I thought, and I worked through it, the way I'd always worked through hard problems. It was a Tuesday 5 days after I'd brought Paula Rennick on, when I spotted Nora Cavett again. I was swinging by a coffee shop near Nathan and Petra's neighborhood, ostensibly to collect Lena after her afternoon at the park. Petra had messaged me the time. Nothing unusual about it, but what I caught sight of through the window froze me on the sidewalk. Nora was in a corner booth, and Petra was sitting right across from her, not just sharing space. Pressed together over the table, voices low, the body language of people making sure nobody nearby could follow what they were saying. I stood there working through what I was seeing. Nora Cavett, the woman Petra had presented at my party as a longtime friend, a wedding planner who'd worked their ceremony. The same woman who'd spent half that evening probing me about the house, what I paid for it, what it was worth. She and Petra, in a private meeting, neither of them had mentioned to anyone. I stepped inside, eyes down, and claimed a table on the far wall. Somebody had left a newspaper on the adjacent chair. I picked it up and opened it in front of my face. Low-tech surveillance. But it held up. Through the fold of the pages, I kept my eyes on them. Petra had her phone out showing Nora something on the screen. Their heads nearly touched as they both leaned in to look. Nora reached into her bag and produced a small spiral notebook, reporter style, and put pen to paper. Nothing about their posture said friendship. This had the feel of a transaction, a working meeting with something at stake. Whatever it wasn't casual. They went at it for about 15 minutes. Then Petra checked her watch, exchanged a few words, and both of them got up. No embrace, no lingering. A brief nod, and they split off in opposite directions out separate doors. I gave it until Petra's car cleared the parking lot. Then I made the call I'd probably regret. I tailed Nora. Gray sedan, nothing that would register. She wasn't rushing surface streets' easy pace, and I held back two vehicles pulse hammering in a way that felt completely out of proportion to what I was doing. Like I was starring in a bad thriller I hadn't agreed to be in. I felt like an idiot. Still, I kept following. 10 minutes later, she signaled and turned down my street. Not Nathan's street, mine. She pulled up across from my house and cut the engine. Sat there. I coasted to a stop 2 blocks back, picked up my phone, and rang Hal Brennan. Hal, it's Gene. Quick favor, can I slip into your side yard for a few minutes? Yeah, sure. What for? Tell you later. I went through the back alley, let myself in through his side gate, and hunkered down low behind the fence line. Clean line of sight to the street. Nora hadn't moved. Phone in hand now photographing my property. The front elevation, the side of the house, the driveway, the garage door. This wasn't curiosity. She was building a record. 20 minutes she sat there photographing, pausing to write something down, studying the structure like she was evaluating what it would take to acquire it or breach it. Eventually the engine turned over, and she pulled away from the curb. I held my position behind Hal's fence, watching until her taillights rounded the bend and vanished. What's coming next changed everything I thought I understood about the people closest to me. Before we get there, I want to ask you something. If you suspected someone in your own family was working against you, would you confront them head-on, or would you stay quiet and build your case in the shadows? I rang Paula from the side yard, still crouched by the fence. Mr. Callahan, there's someone else in the picture, a woman named Nora Cavett. She attended my party. Petra introduced her as an old friend, said she coordinated their wedding, but I just caught the two of them in what was clearly a private meeting. And now Nora is parked outside my house, running a photo survey of the property. Paula went quiet for a beat. Give me a description. Early 40s put together gray sedan. She spent a solid 20 minutes shooting my place from the street. I'll fold her into the investigation. See what surfaces. I hesitated before asking. How many people has Petra pulled into this? Let me go deeper on that, Mr. Callahan. I'll be in touch soon. She was gone. I stood in Hal's yard, eyes fixed on the empty stretch of curb where Nora's car had been. This wasn't Petra working alone anymore. She had backup, someone methodical enough to stake out my property without raising a flag. Except she had raised one because I'd been watching. 2 women, 1 scheme, and me, standing out there in the fading light, trying to work out how to defend myself against people who'd shown they had no ceiling. 2 weeks after the incident, the call I'd been holding my breath for finally came. Nathan was being discharged. I drove to the hospital with everything I knew still locked inside me, unshareable. Not yet. A nurse intercepted me in the hallway outside his room, clipboard in hand, discharge instructions, medications, follow-up appointments, and in a detail that struck me as grimly ironic, guidelines for monitoring anticoagulant levels. I signed where she indicated and went in. Nathan was perched on the edge of the bed, already dressed in the clothes I'd dropped off the day before. He looked washed out, worn thin, but he was there. Ready to head home, son? He nodded, more than ready. The ride to his house was mostly silence. Nathan watched the streets go by without saying much. I kept checking his face. Eventually he turned toward me. Thanks for being there, Dad. I don't remember a lot from that night, but I know you stayed. My throat went tight. Always, son. When I swung into the driveway, Petra was already out the front door before the engine died. Honey. She hauled Nathan's car door open and all but lifted him out. Easy now, don't push yourself. Come here, let me take that. She looped an arm around his waist and steered him toward the house like he was something fragile and irreplaceable. Lena came charging out behind her. Daddy, you're back. She stopped when she registered how gray he looked. She turned her face up to mine. Grandpa is Daddy all better. I bent down and took her hand. He's on his way, sweetheart. He just needs to rest up. Inside, I got Nathan settled in the bedroom. He dropped back against the pillows with a long exhale. For a moment, it was just the two of us. Dad, he said, keeping his voice low. I keep turning that night over. What did I drink? How did this happen? Every instinct I had wanted to unload it all, pull out the lab report. The credit records, the list of searches lay it on the bed between us and let him look. But I watched him sitting there, hollowed out and pale, and I held it back. Not now. Not while he was still this fragile. What if I was off base? What if putting this on Petra shattered him before he'd even healed? The doctors said it was warfarin, I said, measuring every word. Somehow, it got into your system. They're still looking at how. Don't strain yourself trying to reconstruct it. Just work on getting your strength back. Nathan's brow creased. But I'm not on any blood thinners. How could I have had it in me? These things don't always have a clean explanation, I said. Medical anomalies happen. What's important is you're out and you're okay. He studied me for a moment, the look of a man who senses he's only getting the part of the story. Then his eyes closed. I'm exhausted. I'll head downstairs with Lena, I told him. Let you sleep. In the kitchen, I put the kettle on. Petra moved around me, straightening things, glancing at her phone, maintaining the performance of a household running normally. Then I heard her voice from the next room, low and clipped. The door was cracked. She must have assumed I was outside with Lena. I went still beside the kettle and listened. I told you, it went wrong, she was hissing into the phone. He's still alive? We're going to need a different approach. My blood went cold. It's too exposed right now. Everyone's paying attention. We wait. No, I can't talk here. The call cut off. A moment later, she came back into the kitchen, face open and warm. Dad, you should stay for dinner. I'm making Nathan's favorite. I turned and arranged my expression into something that passed for neutral. My pulse was hammering. No, thanks, I said. Nathan needs to rest. Too much activity around the house doesn't help recovery. She tipped her head, watching me. You're right. He needs it calm. I said goodbye to Lena and walked out to my car. Sitting behind the wheel, I gripped it until my knuckles went pale. She'd said it plainly. We need a different approach. We, her, and whoever was on that line. Nora, most likely. And a different approach meant she hadn't abandoned anything. Whatever she'd set in motion at my party, the 6 pills ground into a drink that had been the opening move. Nathan was back home putting his full trust in his wife, and I was the only person alive who understood she was already mapping out the next one. Gathering evidence wasn't going to be enough anymore. I had to get ahead of her. Petra called 3 days after Nathan came home. Her voice had that particular sweetness, the kind that makes you want to check what's underneath it. Dad, I feel so awful about everything that went wrong at the party. I want to help somehow. Make it up to you. I stood in my kitchen with the phone against my ear and let a beat of silence go by. Gave her room to fill it. I know you've been carrying so much. She pressed on all the worry over Nathan, and I feel like I haven't supported you the way I should. Interesting framing. That's thoughtful of you, Petra. I said, keeping my tone even. Nathan mentioned your gutters are overdue for a clean before winter. I've got a ladder, and Saturday's open. Let me handle it. Nathan had mentioned nothing of the sort. I'd cleared those gutters myself 3 weeks back, every downspout, every seam. But I kept my voice easy. That's so kind of you. You've already got enough on your plate worrying about Nathan. Let me take this one thing off your hands, Dad. The word dad had never carried so much calculation. Saturday works, I said. What time? 10:00 a.m. I'll bring my ladder from the garage. The good one, fiberglass extension 28 feet. Professional grade. Professional grade. She made sure I caught that. Sturdy, dependable, the kind of equipment you could trust with your life. Sounds good. See you then. I set the phone down and stood there staring at it for a full minute. She was moving. I called Hal Brennan immediately. Hal, I need something from you. Name it. Saturday morning, can you find a reason to show up at my place around 10:15? Maybe you left a tool here last week. Something low-key like that. A pause. Jean, what's happening? Petra's coming over to help clean my gutters. And you think I don't know what I think? But something's wrong. Just be there. I'll be there. Saturday, I was up at 7. Coffee then, 2 slow passes through the house, clocking angles from every window. At 9:30, I set my phone on the living room sill, angled toward the front yard, where the gutter ran the roofline. Camera app open recording. Clear frame of the driveway and the wall section, where a ladder would naturally go. Then I went outside to wait. Petra pulled in at 10 on the dot, a fiberglass extension ladder strapped across the roof rack. She got out in fitted jeans, work boots, and brown leather gloves, a canvas tool bag over one shoulder. She looked entirely convincing. Capable, neighborly, the devoted daughter-in-law pitching in. Good morning, Dad. Her smile was bright and uncomplicated. Beautiful day for some home maintenance, isn't it? Morning, Petra. She went to the back of her car, freed the ladder with easy familiarity, and carried it to the front of the house. She positioned it against the wall just below the gutter section above the porch. "You stay on the ground, okay?" She gave my shoulder a pat, gentle, slightly condescending. "Your balance isn't what it used to be. We don't need another trip to the hospital." The words hit like a knuckle to the ribs. But I smiled back. "You're right. I appreciate you doing this." "Of course." She steadied the ladder with a small test shake, then started up. The tool bag swayed at her side as she climbed. She stopped around the halfway point, roughly 12 feet up, and peered into the gutter. "Oh my goodness, Dad, these are completely packed. This is going to take a while." "Take all the time you need," I called up. "I'm not going anywhere." She nodded, drew a small hand rake from the tool bag, and went through the motions of clearing debris. Leaves dropped into the flower bed below. I waited, watching until her attention was fully on the roofline. Then I eased back toward the front door, slipped inside, and positioned myself at the window where my phone was still recording. Through the glass, I had an unobstructed view, and what I saw sent ice through my veins. Petra wasn't working on the gutters at all. Her hands were on the ladder, working the locking mechanism where the two sections overlapped. I'd spent 40 years around ladders. I understood how they were built, how the locking systems were meant to function, and exactly how they came apart when something was tampered with. She reached into the tool bag and produced a small ratcheting socket wrench, the kind you'd use for careful, deliberate work. She began backing out the bolts where the extension sections joined together, not pulling them free, just loosening them. 2 turns, 3. Then she moved to the safety pins, the small spring-loaded clips that hold the ladder's joints locked when it's fully extended. She pressed each release, slid them partway out, and left them dangling loose in their housings. Not far enough to make the ladder drop on the spot, but far enough that the right amount of weight or a single shift in balance would cause the joints to buckle. The ladder would give way, and whoever was on it would go down. From 15 feet up at my age, a fall like that wasn't just an injury risk. It was potentially a death sentence. She wrapped up in under 5 minutes, tucked the wrench back into the tool bag, and returned to scraping at the gutters as though nothing had taken place. Then she called down. "Dad, can you come hold the base for me? It's feeling a little unsteady up here." I didn't move. She called again, louder this time. "Dad, are you there?" I held my position at the window, not making a sound, just watching. She glanced down, frowning, and shifted her weight on the rungs. The frame groaned but didn't give. She'd done the work carefully. It wouldn't fail under her alone, not on the way down. But put someone heavier on it, or let someone stand at the base while it flexed the wrong direction. She descended at an easy pace, testing each rung, and stepped onto the ground. "Dad," she called toward the house, letting concern color her voice. I stood at the window, pulse-hammering phone, still capturing every second. She was on my property in my front yard, and she had just spent 5 minutes engineering a ladder to collapse, counting on me to climb it or stand beneath it, or do something careless enough to finish what the poison drink had started. She figured I was too old to notice, too trusting, too easy. But I'd watched every move. I was reaching for the door handle, turning over how to turn down her request, without letting on that I'd seen everything when I heard an engine. Hal Brennan's pickup rolled into my driveway right on time. He got out and raised a hand. Hey, Gene swung by to look at that porch railing we talked about last week." We'd never discussed any railing, but Hal was playing the part without a crack. He glanced up at Petra on the ladder. "Oh, wow, home maintenance day." Petra looked down, and I caught the flicker of irritation cross her face before she got the smile back in place. "Just helping Dad clean his gutters." Got it handled. Hal ambled over, hands in his pockets, the unhurried ease of someone who'd spent 4 decades on job sites. "Hey, before you come down, let me take a look at that ladder." Old habit. Spent too many years watching guys get hurt because nobody checked. Safety first. "It's fine," Petra said, her smile pulling tight. "I've used this ladder plenty of times." "Humor me," Hal said. His tone stayed easy, but something underneath it didn't leave room for argument. Petra descended, stepped off to the side, and swept her hand toward the ladder with a clipped little gesture. "Go ahead." Hal moved to the base, gripped both sides, and gave it a shake, then a harder one. His expression darkened. "Gene," he said, keeping his voice low, "get over here. Look at this." I came out of the house and walked over, working to keep my face blank. Hal pointed to the joints where the two sections met. "These bolts are barely seated. The safety pins are pulled. The whole load-bearing connection is shot." He pressed on one side to demonstrate. The ladder shifted far more than it should have, far more. If anyone climbed this is past the midpoint, Hal said, his voice going flat and hard, the whole thing gives out. We're talking serious injury from that height. Broken bones at a minimum, could be a lot worse. I looked at Petra. She was standing with her arms folded, jaw set like concrete. I don't understand, I said, keeping my voice baffled. Petra, was it like this when you pulled it out? She paused just a beat, barely visible. Then she shook her head. I don't know. It was fine the last time I had it out. It must have already been this way. I grabbed it from our garage. Maybe something sat too long. Maybe it corroded or Petra. Hal cut her off. He crouched beside the ladder and ran a fingertip along one of the bolt heads. Look here. He stood and held his finger out for both of us to see. Fine metallic dust. Fresh. These marks are new, he said. Tool marks. See where the wrench bit into the head. These bolts were backed off on purpose and recently. The air between us thickened. Petra's face went red. What exactly are you saying? That someone tampered with this ladder? Are you... Her voice climbed, wobbled. Are you accusing me of something? Hal didn't answer. He just held her gaze. Petra turned to me, and I watched tears rise in her eyes. Real ones or something, close enough to pass. Dad, she said, her voice cracking. You can't actually believe after what happened to Nathan after everything. You think I would try to hurt you? I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I said it quietly without heat. I think you should go home, Petra. Her face shifted. You're going to take his word over mine. I'm Nathan's wife. I'm your family. Go, I said. She stared at me. Then she snatched up the tool bag, yanked it off the ground, and wheeled on Hal. Nathan is going to hear about how I was treated here today. Drive safe, I said. She hurled the bag into the back seat, wrestled the ladder onto the roof rack without bothering to secure it, and dropped into the driver's seat. The engine fired hard. She reversed with a screech of tires and shot out of the driveway. Hal and I stood there in the quiet she left behind. Jean, he said after a moment, what in the hell is going on? I went back inside, retrieved my phone from the windowsill, and brought it out. I'd been recording the whole time. I pulled up the footage and handed it to him. Hal watched, his face drained. Lord, he said under his breath. On the screen, Petra's hands moved across the ladder joints with steady precision. Wrench bolts, safety pins, unhurried, and deliberate, every second of it captured clean. Hal passed the phone back. Jean, this is attempted murder. You have to call the police. Not yet. I need more than this, Hal. I need enough that Nathan will actually believe me. If I go to him right now, she'll cry. She'll say it's a misunderstanding. She'll say she didn't notice the ladder was already damaged. He loves her. He's going to want to accept her story. Hal looked at me steadily. And if she makes another move while you're building your case, then I'll be ready for it. Jean, that's a serious risk you're taking, he said. I know. He left not long after, told me to call if anything came up, told me to watch myself. I stood alone in the driveway holding my phone. I had the lab results proving she'd laced my drink. I had the financial records laying out her debt. I had the search history about inheritance and incapacity. And now I had video of her tampering with a ladder, a clear attempt to cause me grave harm. But Hal was right about the thing that mattered most. She'd just tried again. And someone as calculating and cornered as Petra wasn't going to quit until she finished it or got stopped. I needed something that left no opening, something that even Nathan's love for his wife couldn't explain away. Paula Rennick called me early on a Tuesday morning, 4 days after the ladder incident. There was something in her voice I hadn't heard before. Urgency tangled with something that sounded almost like bewilderment. Jean, I need to sit down with you. Can you come to the office? What I found about Nora Cabot isn't something I can walk through on the phone. I grabbed my keys. 20 minutes, I said. I'll be there. Paula had a thick file folder on her desk. When I arrived, her laptop open alongside it. She got straight to it. I ran the full background on Nora Cabot like you asked. I sat down. And she's working with Petra, right? Paula paused. She looked at me with something careful in her eyes. Not exactly. What do you mean, not exactly? Nora Cabot is a licensed private investigator? The words didn't land right away. I just sat there. What? She turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was an open licensing database. Nora Cabot, private investigator, license number 47832, status active years, in business, 15. Below that were business registration documents. A business address in Southeast Denver. Client reviews, dozens of them, all 5 stars. Membership in the Colorado Association of Licensed Investigators. Her specialties: domestic cases, infidelity investigations, financial fraud, asset tracking. I don't understand, I said slowly. I watched the two of them together at that coffee shop. They were meeting, working something out. That's what threw me too, Paula said. Why would a licensed PI be sitting down with Petra? So I kept pulling threads. She lifted a stack of bank statements from the folder and pushed them across the desk. Look at this entry. 3 months back, March 15th. I scanned the page. A payment made out to Nora Cavett Investigations. $5,000, labeled as a retainer, and the account holder, my chest tightened. Nathan Callahan. Not a joint account, not one Petra shared. Nathan's personal checking account. His teacher's credit union, the one he'd held since before the marriage. Nathan hired her, I said. My voice sounded like it was coming from somewhere else. 3 months before your housewarming party. I raised my eyes to Paula. Why wouldn't he have told me? I can't answer that, she said. But here's what the money trail says. She tapped the statement. Nora isn't working for Petra. She's working against her. Your son hired a private investigator to look into his own wife. The room seemed to close in, too warm, too tight. I turned back through every moment of the past weeks I'd misread. Nora, at my party. I'd assumed she was Petra's ally, her confederate. But she wasn't. She'd been watching Petra, observing her building a file. Nora, photographing my house. I'd taken it for reconnaissance, helping Petra scope out the property. But that wasn't it either. She'd been cataloging my assets, assembling evidence. Nora, meeting Petra at that coffee shop, I'd seen conspiracy. But it was something else entirely. She'd been tracking her, pressing her, maybe both. I had it completely backwards, I said quietly. Paula nodded. It looks like your son had his suspicions 3 months ago. Serious enough to pay for professional help. Then why shut me out? That's what I can't answer. She closed the laptop. What did Nathan uncover? And why keep it from his own father? I got to my feet. My legs didn't feel entirely reliable. I need to go see him. Jean. Paula's voice caught me at the door. Be careful. If Nathan's been running his own investigation for 3 months, this situation has layers we haven't seen yet. I sat in my car in the lot with the engine off, both hands around the wheel. Nathan had hired Nora 3 months ago. 3 months before my housewarming party. 3 months before he nearly died from a drink that had been poison for me. The sequence made the walls tilt. What had he turned up in those 3 months? Had he found the debt? The search history cataloging inheritance and incapacity. Had Nora reported back what Petra was planning? And if he knew, if he actually knew why, hadn't he said a word to me? Had he been trying to shield me? Building something airtight before he made a charge he couldn't walk back? Or was he still hoping he was wrong? Hoping that the woman he'd married wasn't capable of what the evidence was pointing toward? I kept returning to the night of the party. The way Nathan had been standing close behind me. The way he'd reached for that glass on the side table and swallowed it without a thought. Had it been accidental? Had he just grabbed the nearest drink? Or had he known no? That was somewhere I couldn't go. He wouldn't have. But then why had he put $5,000 into hiring Nora 3 months earlier? Why investigate his own wife and say nothing? My son had known something was wrong, something serious enough to open his wallet and retain a private investigator, but not serious enough, or maybe far too serious, to bring to me. I took out my phone and found Nathan's name in my contacts. My thumb sat over the call button, then I set the phone down. I wasn't ready, because if I called him now, if I asked why he'd hired Nora, what she'd uncovered, why he'd locked me out of it, I'd have to sit with the answer. And I wasn't sure I could. Not if it meant my son had known his wife was dangerous. Not if he'd suspected she might come after me. Not if he'd carried that knowledge in silence while she dropped pills into a glass at my party. I pulled out of the lot and drove. I needed answers. But for the first time I could remember, I was frightened of what they'd be. I couldn't keep waiting, though. Finding out Nathan had retained Nora Cavett had stolen 2 nights of sleep from me. I had to know what he'd found and why he'd gone quiet about it. 2 days after my meeting with Paula, I was parked outside Lakewood High School, where Nathan taught English to juniors and seniors, trying to figure out how to begin a conversation I had no idea how to approach. The lunch bell sounded at 12:30. Students spilled out of the building in a tide of noise, heading for the parking lot or the food trucks lined up along the street. I watched them and felt the weight of my age. Then I spotted Nathan. He came out through a side entrance with a canvas messenger bag over his shoulder, moving toward his car. He didn't see me until I was out of mine and walking toward him. He pulled up short. Dad. Hey, son. His expression shifted confusion, then concern. What are you doing here? Everything okay? I need to talk to you. Just a few minutes. Can we grab coffee? He glanced at his watch, seemed to weigh it. Okay, There's a place on the corner. I've got 30 minutes. The coffee shop was small and local, the kind with mismatched chairs and student art crowding the walls. We ordered at the counter and settled at a table by the window. Nathan set his bag on the floor and curled both hands around his cup. What's going on? You look like something's been eating at you. I didn't have a clean way into it, so I went straight. Nathan, I have to ask you something. Have you noticed anything off about Petra lately? His face went flat, then guarded. What kind of off? Money problems, shifts in how she's acting. Anything that doesn't add up. We're fine, Dad. His voice was measured, deliberate. What's making you ask? I'm just worried. After what happened at the party, the doctors saying it was some kind of drug interaction, he cut in too fast. A freak accident. That's all it was. I leaned in. Was it? Nathan went still. He fixed his gaze on his coffee. The quiet between us stretched. What else would it be? He finally said. I wanted to put it all on the table, Nora, the $5,000, the 3-month trail that led straight back to him. But something in how he was sitting stopped me. He knew something. I could feel it. The way his eyes slid past mine instead of landing on them. The set of his jaw. The way his grip on that cup had gone rigid, like he was holding on to something he wasn't willing to release. But he wasn't going to talk about it. Or couldn't. Or was guarding something he didn't know how to say out loud yet. I shifted direction. That night at the party, I said, "Do you remember any of it? Which glass did you pick up?" Another silence, longer this time. Nathan stared into his coffee. "No," he said, barely above a whisper. "I've gone back over it. There's nothing. Just blank. I came to in the hospital. You took a glass from the side table," I said. "Do you remember what made you reach for that one?" He looked up. Something moved through his eyes, recognition, or something like fear. I couldn't parse which. "Does it matter which glass I drank from?" "It might," I said. He held my gaze for a moment. Then he checked his watch and stood. "Dad, I have to get back. We can talk more another time." "Nathan?" "Another time." His voice had a finality to it. "My students are waiting." He picked up his bag and walked out. I stayed at the table watching him through the glass. Nathan crossed the street toward the school building. Then he stopped, pulled out his phone, and made a call. I couldn't make out a word, but I could read the body language. Tense, urgent. One hand pressed to his forehead, pacing a small, tight circle on the sidewalk. Who was he calling? Petra Nora. Someone else entirely. The call lasted maybe 2 minutes. Then he hung up, stood for a moment staring at the screen, and went back inside. I sat over my untouched coffee for another 10 minutes. My son was keeping something back. That was beyond question now. But what was he shielding? Was he protecting me, gathering his own evidence, working the problem, quietly hiring Nora Cavett, 3 months out from the party, so he'd have something solid before he spoke? Or was he protecting Petra out of love, out of unwillingness to believe what the facts were showing him, out of a loyalty that refused to let go, even now? Or was it something else? Was he protecting himself from a truth that once faced couldn't be unfaced? From the knowledge that his wife, the mother of his child, was capable of something unthinkable. I'd come to that school looking for answers and left carrying more questions than before, but one thing had become undeniable. Nathan's silence was more dangerous than Petra's scheming. Because if my son was sitting on something and refusing to say it, then whatever he'd uncovered 3 months ago was either too devastating to voice or too tangled for him to know how to share. Either way, the clock was running down. Petra had made 2 attempts. The poison drink, the sabotage ladder. She was going to try again. And if Nathan had known if he'd been sitting on his suspicions for 3 months and still said nothing, then I couldn't afford to wait around for him to find his nerve. I had to move. Paula Rennick called 2 days later on a Sunday morning. I was in the garage making a show of sorting tools when the phone rang. Her voice was clipped. "Gene." I turned something up. "It's worse than we thought. Can you get to my office now?" I was there in 20 minutes. Paula had her laptop open, papers covering the desk. No greeting, and she just waved me into the chair. I got into Petra's phone records, text message backups. "There's another person involved." My stomach fell. She turned the laptop to face me. A text thread filled the screen. The contact was saved simply as Cynthia Noah, last name. Cynthia Langford, 32 years old, based in Albuquerque. Paula brought up a driver's license photo. The woman in it looked like a younger, sharper featured version of Petra, clearly related. "She's Petra's sister." I studied the photo. I never knew Petra had a sister. Most people don't. They keep the connection quiet publicly. but privately Paula slid a stack of printed messages across the desk. These go back 6 months. I picked up the first page. The earliest texts were from February 4 months prior. Cynthia had asked Petra whether she'd spoken to the lawyer yet. Petra said yes, said the lawyer told her that if they could prove I was incapable of managing my own affairs, power would transfer to Nathan and then through Nathan to her. Cynthia had asked what would happen if I didn't cooperate. Petra's response drained the heat from the room. There were ways to make someone look incompetent. My hands started shaking. The next batch was from March, 3 months before my party. Cynthia told Petra she'd located a source, somebody who could get what Petra needed, but it would cost $800. Petra told her to go ahead and said she'd send the money. A day later, Cynthia confirmed it had shipped, no trail she'd written. Paula pointed to another document on the desk. I tracked that, $800. Petra sent it as a money order. Cynthia used it to purchase warfarin through an online pharmacy in Mexico. Paula laid out the receipts, a shipping confirmation to Cynthia's address in Albuquerque, then a second shipping record. Cynthia had mailed a package to Petra 1 week after that. She purchased the poison, I said barely above a whisper, and sent it along to Petra. Yes. I turned to the next page. These messages were from late May, 2 weeks out from my housewarming party. Cynthia had asked whether the package had arrived. Petra confirmed it had. Said this Saturday, my party would be the right occasion. Cynthia told her to keep it clean, make it look natural. A heart attack, a stroke, something consistent with my age. Petra wrote back that she knew what she was doing. I couldn't pull in a full breath. The next thread was dated June 9th, the morning after the party. Cynthia had sent a string of question marks demanding to know what had happened. Petra told her it had gone wrong, that Nathan had drunk from the glass instead of me. Cynthia's reply was all caps stunned, asking if Petra was serious, asking if Nathan was all right. Petra said he was in the hospital, that the doctors had flagged warfarin poisoning that he'd pull through. Cynthia called her an idiot, called it a catastrophe. Petra wrote back that she knew, told Cynthia to delete everything and stop texting. Cynthia's final message in the thread, too late for that. They tried to wipe it, Paula said. But I recovered the whole thing from cloud backup. I put the papers down. My hands were shaking too hard to hold them properly. They planned this together. Paula nodded. Cynthia supplied the means. Petra carried it out. Classic two-party conspiracy. There was one more cluster of messages from 3 days back, right after the latter incident. Cynthia had asked whether Petra had done it, whether she'd finished the job. Petra said I hadn't taken the bait, that my neighbor had turned up at exactly the wrong moment and that she thought I might be on to something. Cynthia told her to stop, said she was going to get herself caught. But Petra said she couldn't walk away from it. Not at this point. That I was digging, that she had to finish it before I found everything. Cynthia's last message was 3 words. You're insane. I looked up at Paula. My throat felt like it was closing. This is premeditated murder. Conspiracy to commit murder. Yes, and Cynthia's involvement means if we hand this to the authorities, both sisters face charges. Do we have enough? Paula leaned back. For the police? Without question. The text messages, the money order, the pharmacy receipts, the shipping records, it's all there and documented. They can't explain any of it away. And for Nathan, she said, watching my face, that's a call only you can make, Gene. You're his father. You know how his mind works. Will he accept what's in front of him, or will he find a way to explain it? I didn't answer. I didn't know. I drove home with the printed messages in a folder on the passenger seat. This hadn't been Petra operating alone. Her sister had been in it from the start, had sourced the drugs, had walked Petra through the planning, had known exactly what was intended for my party, and had only unraveled when the wrong person ended up in the hospital. 2 sisters, 1 inheritance they had already mentally divided up, $320 in debt between them, probably more. They had been running this scheme since February at minimum, maybe earlier. They'd procured warfarin from Mexico, moved it across state lines, mapped out the execution down to the date and the venue, and when it fell apart, when Nathan went down, instead of me, Petra hadn't quit. She'd come back with a ladder, and somewhere in Albuquerque, Cynthia Langford was waiting for word that her sister had finally gotten it right. I pulled into my driveway, killed the engine, and sat staring at that folder. I had the full picture now. The financial records showing Petra's debt, the search history about inheritance and incapacity, the video of her working over the ladder, and now these messages, proof that all of it had been planned in advance, proof that she hadn't acted alone. The question was what to do with it. The social worker arrived on Thursday afternoon, 3 days after my meeting with Paula about Cynthia. I'd been anticipating this. It was Petra's next logical move. Even so, watching a government vehicle ease into my driveway sent a cold current through me. I had the door open before she reached the bell. She was in her late 30s, dressed professionally, clipboard in hand, official agency badge on her lapel. "Mr. Callahan, I'm Gail Norwood from Adult Protective Services. A report was filed, expressing concern for your welfare. May I come in?" I'd been ready for this. "Of course, please." I brought her into the living room and offered tea. She accepted to set her clipboard on the coffee table and took a seat. I brought 2 cups from the kitchen and settled in across from her. Gail opened her folder. "I want to be straightforward with you. The report raises several concerns: possible self-neglect, confusion, memory difficulties, unsafe living conditions. The person who filed it expressed doubt about your ability to manage independently." I kept my voice level. "I understand. Can you tell me who submitted the report?" "Reports of this nature can be filed anonymously," she said, her tone measured. "What I can tell you is that it came from a family member who said they were worried about you." My daughter-in-law, Petra Gale's expression stayed professionally composed. "I'm not in a position to confirm the source, but I'm here to make an objective assessment." "Of course. Where would you like to begin?" She stood. "If it's all right, I'd like to walk through the home." I took her through every room, the living room tidy, organized, no clutter, no hazards. The kitchen stocked with fresh food, everything in its proper place. In the bathroom, the medications were lined up in the cabinet, each one labeled clearly with a current date. Gail photographed the labels and made notes. "You're on warfarin and several cardiac medications, all current prescriptions." "Yes, my cardiologist keeps close track of everything." The bedroom was in order. Bed made nothing amiss. Gail noted it all. Back in the living room, she looked over her clipboard. "Mr. Callahan, the home is well maintained. I'm not seeing any indication of self-neglect or unsafe conditions." "Thank you." "There's also some documentation I'd like you to have," I said. I'd known this visit was coming, so I'd gotten ready for it. I retrieved the folder I'd assembled. Inside, a current medical clearance from Dr. Gerald Pruitt, my cardiologist, signed 1 week earlier. Results from a cognitive assessment, a mini mental state examination with a perfect score of 30 out of 30. Financial records showing accounts and balance bills, current everything meticulously organized, property tax receipts, up-to-date insurance policies, home maintenance records. Gail went through every page with real attention. "You came prepared. In my experience, most people I see don't bring anything close to this." "Retired architect," I said. "Keeping records is second nature." The cognitive evaluation and medical clearance carry particular weight here. Nothing in either one points to diminished capacity. She shut the folder and set it aside. "Mr. Callahan, having reviewed everything you've brought and observed you directly this morning, I find nothing that supports what was alleged." I shifted forward in my chair. "Gail, there's something else you need to hear. I believe whoever filed that report did it to get back at me." Her pen hovered motionless. "Get back at you for what? Would you be willing to look at something? It goes directly to why I think that." A slow nod. "Show me." I turned the laptop toward her and pulled up what I'd been holding on to for weeks, files that had felt like a stone lodged behind my ribs. I started with the lab work from the whiskey bottle. "This is a toxicology result showing 450 mg of warfarin in a drink served at my housewarming. Mixed with alcohol, that's enough to kill someone." The composed professional expression Gail had worn all morning wavered as she read. Then, the phone footage. "Watch what Petra does to the ladder. She's working the bolts loose and pulling the safety pins from the load-bearing joints." She didn't speak while the clip ran. When it ended, I brought up the text thread between Petra and Cynthia. Langford pulled from cloud backup, the planning, the shopping, what happened in the aftermath. Gail read every message, then went back and read them a second time. Last came Paula Rennick's financial findings, $320 in debt tied to Petra. I slid a chronological summary across the table, every relevant event from February through the present, laid out in order. Gail put her pen flat on the table. "Mr. Callahan, are you telling me your daughter-in-law tried to poison you?" "I'm telling you the evidence points that direction." "The poison didn't finish the job, so she moved to the ladder. When that failed too, she came after me through your agency, trying to make me look like I'd lost my faculties." "Have you taken any of this to law enforcement?" "Not yet. Getting the documentation in order came first. That's the next call I make. Gail drew her notebook closed. The professional polish held, but her eyes had changed. Something behind them had quietly shifted. Mr. Callahan, in 10 years doing APS assessments, you stand among the most capable people I've sat across from. This home is well maintained, your thinking is sharp, and everything you manage is clearly in order. I'll be marking this case unfounded. I appreciate that. She rose and began collecting her things. What I'm also required to do under the law is flag suspected elder abuse for our investigative team and for law enforcement. What you've presented, financial exploitation, physical endangerment, a fraudulent report, those fall under criminal statutes. That landed in my chest like a fist. Understood. My full assessment along with the materials you've provided goes to Detective Craig Hester at the Denver Police Bureau. You should hear from him inside 24 hours. I'll be here. Once Gail Norwood's car rounded the corner and disappeared, I stayed at the window for a moment, knowing her report was already moving through the system, my name being cleared in one column, while Petra's was surfacing in another. She had pointed the machinery of the state at me, expecting it to crush me. Instead, it had pivoted. Within a day, police would be pulling at threads she thought were safely buried. Every record I'd kept, every timestamp and cross-reference was now evidence in a criminal matter. The home I'd chosen as a fresh start had become ground zero for an investigation, but something loosened in me that I hadn't felt in weeks. There were other people in this now. I didn't have to carry it alone. Detective Craig Hester rang at 8:47 the next morning. I know the time precisely because I'd been up since 5, working through my third cup of coffee with my phone face up on the table in front of me. Mr. Callahan, Detective Hester, Denver Police Bureau. Adult Protective Services passed your file to me. I'd like you to come in. Are you available before 10 Zawiru? I'll be there at 9:50. I walked into the precinct with 10 minutes to spare. The place had the feel of a building designed to remind you it meant business. Gray everywhere, hard floors, lighting that left no shadows. An officer at the desk sent me up to the detective division on the 3rd floor. Hester was waiting in the corridor somewhere in his mid-40s, the kind of eyes that had seen enough to stop being surprised, bearing that said he did this for a living. He extended a hand. Mr. Callahan, glad you came. He walked me back to an interview room, bare walls, a metal table, a camera mounted high in the corner. The chair was the sort that discourages comfort. That's the point. He settled in across from me, folder open. I've gone through Gail Norwood's report and the initial evidence package. We'll need to work through this piece by piece. Could be a few hours. Take whatever time you need. I'd organized everything in advance, each category in its own labeled folder. Hester moved through the materials with the rhythm of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, reading carefully, pausing to write, circling back with questions. He started with the whiskey bottle analysis. 450 milligrams of warfarin, he said, reading it aloud. Chain of custody is documented throughout. Clean. Let's keep going. Nathan's records from St. Joseph Hospital, Denver, came next. Admission, June 8th. Diagnosis warfarin poisoning. Treatment notes covered the vitamin K protocol and the blood transfusions required. Then my own prescription file. 6 pills unaccounted for, Hester observed. Refilled May 26th. You maintain detailed logs. My health. I pay attention to it. He moved to the access log. Petra at my house 3 days before the party. The phone video, bolt by bolt, pin by pin, her hands working the ladder, while the timestamp burned in the corner of the frame. Paula Rennick's report on the debt, $320,000, and the browser search history, inheritance laws, incapacity standards, warfarin thresholds, overdose presentations. The Petra Cynthia Langford messages. Hester read every one of them, then started over. The $800 money order, Mexican pharmacy receipts, the Albuquerque shipping record, Hal Brennan's written statement about the latter. He went through the full stack twice. The pen kept moving. Then he looked up. This holds together. The documentation is thorough. I'm an architect. A structure is only as strong as what holds it up. Evidence is no different. Hester closed the folder. Your son needs to be in this room. He was harmed directly that makes him both a witness and a victim. A tightness moved through my chest. He doesn't have the full picture yet. He drank something meant to kill you. We need his account. Is it all right if I reach out to him now? Can I stay when you do? I'd actually want you here. He dialed. It picked up right away. Nathan Callahan. Yes, wary. Mr. Callahan, This is Detective Craig Hester with the Denver Police Bureau. I need you to come into the station. We have an active investigation, and it involves you. You haven't done anything wrong. This is about the incident at your father's gathering. How soon can you get here?" A beat of silence, Nathan working through it. Yes, give me 45 minutes. Come to the front desk and ask for me." Hester ended the call and turned to me. Hearing this is going to hit him hard. I know it will. So we waited. Hester occupied himself with the files once more, while I nursed stale coffee from a styrofoam cup and kept one eye on the clock. 43 minutes in a knock. The door opened. Nathan came in, found my face before anything else. "Dad, what is this? What are the police doing in this?" Hester rose. "Please take a seat, Mr. Callahan. There's a lot I need to walk you through." Nathan lowered himself into the chair, slowly his gaze bouncing between us. Then Hester spread the evidence across the table the way a contractor lays out plans before a build. Methodical, structural, each piece connected to the next. The lab work, the missing pills, the debt, the messages, the footage. I watched my son absorb it. The stages came quickly. Disbelief first. Someone made an error. This can't be right. Then shock. That's not possible. Then something raw, the moment he remembered the glass. I drank from Dad's glass, then a desperate reach for an exit. There's gotta be something we're missing. And finally, no exit. His hands trembled. Tears broke and ran. He looked straight at me. "She was trying to kill you, and I'm the one who drank it." Hester kept his voice low and steady. "That glass wasn't meant for you. You weren't who she was after. I could have died." Nathan's voice had gone hollow. "You nearly did," I said, quiet, just the truth. His breath came in fragments. "All that time she was, oh God, Dad, I'm so sorry." Hester leaned in. "Nathan, in the weeks before the party, did anything about Petra's behavior seem off to you?" Nathan's eyes dropped to the table. Tears hit the metal surface. A long pause. When he raised his head, everything in his face had collapsed inward. "There's something I have to say." He looked at Hester, then over at me. "I need a few minutes alone with my father. Just us." Hester glanced my way. I gave a small nod. 5 minutes. Door's right here." He stacked the folders under his arm and stepped out, pulling it shut. The room went quiet. Just Nathan and me, the gray walls, the metal table between us, and whatever he'd been holding back. He looked at me and his face cracked open. "Dad, I've known something wasn't right for 3 months. I brought in Nora myself. I've been running my own investigation into Petra since March." The words settled over me like cold water. My son hadn't been looking the other way. He'd been doing exactly what I was doing, working the same problem from another angle, each of us moving in the dark to shield the other. Neither of us knowing. "Why didn't you say something?" I asked. My voice came out barely above a whisper. Nathan pulled in a shaking breath and started to talk. His voice kept fracturing as he went. What came out in that small, bare room reshaped everything I believed I knew about the months behind us. 3 months ago, I came across credit card statements in Petra's car. I wasn't going through her things. Her purse toppled over, and the papers fell out. The numbers hit me hard. 89,000 on one card, 45 on another. I didn't say a word while he talked. I raised it with her, carefully asked if there was something we should discuss about money. She said it was temporary, she'd deal with it. But it didn't sit right. A week later, I caught a phone call I wasn't supposed to hear. She was in the garage, thought I'd gone to work. I'd turned back from my lunch. She said, "He's in the way. Once he's gone, everything goes to Nathan. Then it's ours." His voice faltered. I assumed she meant ending the marriage, splitting what we had. Then she said, "He won't be around much longer anyway. Just needs a little push." Nathan understood then who she meant. "Why didn't you say something?" I kept my voice low. I couldn't be certain what I'd heard was what I thought. I couldn't bring myself to accuse my wife of... I couldn't even hold the thought still. So I brought in Nora. He'd found Nora Cavett through his own, searching a well-regarded investigator who specialized in family matters. He'd paid her $5,000 from an account Petra had no knowledge of through his teacher's credit union. Nora worked the case for 2 months. She uncovered the full debt, over $320,000. She also found the search history on their home computer. Nathan ran through what she'd reported Petra had looked up: warfarin and overdose symptoms. how long it takes to establish incompetence for a power of attorney, inheritance law for elderly parents. I kept reaching for some other explanation. He said, maybe she had a reason that made sense. I wanted to be wrong. Then 1 week before the party, Nora called him at school. She said, your wife just bought warfarin illegally through her sister in Albuquerque. I have the transaction records. She's moving on this Saturday, your father's housewarming. The options Nathan had were all bad. Go to Petra directly. Come to me. Kill the party. But Nora told him none of that would hold. Without catching Petra in the act with people watching, she'd wriggle free accident, confusion, misunderstanding. They needed something, she couldn't walk back. So Nora attended the party undercover, playing the role of Petra's friend, while Nathan stayed close and watched. I felt the understanding arrive. You saw her prepare the drink. Nathan wasn't hiding the tears now. Nora texted me, eyes on your father is old-fashioned, she just put something in the shaker. He moved in. He watched Petra pour the glass, watched her place it on the table, with a napkin across it to mark it out. Another message from Nora. The medication is in it. Don't let him drink it. After Nathan and Lena drove off that evening, I moved slowly through the rooms. The living room where the party happened, new furniture, different now. The kitchen where I'd stood, counting pills. The medicine cabinet reorganized. The office where I'd built the case file, those folders boxed and put away. I stood at the window, looking out at the cottonwood tree that had sold me on the property, its branches spreading like a benediction over the lawn. I thought about Lena and what I was passing on. Not just the deed to a house, something that can't be appraised. How to stand your ground. How to trust what your gut is telling you. How to build a case before you act. How family is measured by what people do not, what they're called. This house was supposed to be a quiet place to retire. It had become a battleground. Now, it was finally what I'd always wanted it to be. Not just walls and a roof, but a place where the people who love you feel safe walking through the door. I switched off the porch light and turned the lock. The same door I'd opened 6 months ago for the housewarming, when I was still innocent enough to believe that loneliness was the thing I needed to guard against. I knew differently now. The real danger comes in familiar forms, warm voices, loving words, and a drink placed just so on the table with a napkin to mark it out. But I'd learned something else too, that family isn't defined by shared blood. It's defined by who holds steady next to you when everything closes in. Nathan drank poison to keep me alive. I built a case to protect him. Together, we created something neither of us could have managed alone. This house, this beautiful craftsman home I'd spent 30 years working to afford, was finally truly mine. Not just on paper, though. The deed sat safely in Lois Gideon's files. Mine in the way that counted most, where love set the rules. Where Lena's laughter filled the rooms, where my son and I had pieced trust back together from the rubble. Tomorrow I'd rise in my own bed, brew coffee in my own kitchen, and give the day to whatever I pleased. That freedom, that quiet, that plain certainty of being safe, that was what I'd been fighting to claim. That was what I'd won. Standing in the living room, as moonlight came through windows, I'd picked out myself. I understood something essential. A house becomes a home, not when you purchase it, but when you're willing to fight for it. If you've made it to the end of this story with me, thank you. That means something. I've turned this whole chapter over in my mind more times than I can count. What it took to get here. The months of fear, the careful documentation, the long nights wondering if anyone would believe me. And then my son sitting across a metal table in a police interview room, hands shaking, telling me he had swallowed poison on purpose to save my life. That's not something you carry lightly, but I believe God doesn't let that kind of love go to waste. The Lord's timing was not mine, and the road was harder than it had any right to be, but we came through it. If this story reached you, if you're somewhere in the middle of your own fight, wondering whether it's worth it here, is what I'd want you to know. Document everything. Dates, amounts, conversations. Evidence you can hold in your hands is the only thing that can't be argued away. Trust the instinct that tells you something is wrong. If it sits uneasily with you, look closer before you dismiss it. Don't face it alone. The right person, a trusted friend, a professional, someone with nothing to gain can see what fear makes you miss. And remember, family is not about the name on the deed. It's about who stands with you when the walls close in. This is a story for anyone navigating that kind of season, a real family revenge story that reminds those of us in the adults, 50-plus years of our lives, that it is never too late to fight for what is yours and never too late to find out who truly has your back. If this moved you, leave a comment below and tell me what stayed with you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't already subscribed to Honor Revenge Stories, there are more stories here worth your time. Thank you for listening. Take good care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one.